Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Ness. I'm here with Dr. Bob Enright, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about um, forgiveness, the idea, and be sharing some music with you and talking about what's going on right now in the world with this COVID-19 pandemic and the way that that's affecting all of us. Good morning, Dr. Bob.
Hello, Sam. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for your music.
Absolutely. I think I'll dive into this one and we can chat a little bit more. This is my song called Forgiveness. I'm careless, courageous, I am free. My guitar in my hands, and the highway at my feet. I have strength in my lungs, nothing's stopping me. And I wake to find the darkness, it's just another dream. I open up my eyes, I understand that I must go. Seems I've overstayed my welcome in the place that I call home. I bow my head down like so many times before. I cry out for forgiveness as my knees roll to the floor. I fear I know the answer, and I fear fear itself. I fear the only answer is to do this by myself. Oh, I know. I know. When I make peace and I am saved, my demons do not rest, and I just run away. If my pride looks like my courage, then how dare I speak of grace? I will find my path. I will find my path. If I can find my strength. My brother, I have pain. It doesn't go away. It's somewhere in my stomach. It's somewhere in my way. My brother, I have rage. I can't live this way. My eyes, they cry for sunlight, but I'm blind all the same. I bow my head down like so many times before. I cry out for forgiveness as my knees fall to the floor. I fear I know the answer, and I fear fear itself. I fear the only answer is to do this by myself. Oh, I know. I know. When I make peace and I am saved, demons do not rest, and I just run away. If my problems like my courage, then how dare I speak of grace? I will find my path. I will find my path. Find my strength. If I can find my strength. Well, that's my song, Forgiveness. And I guess, Dr. Enright, I don't know if you would like to dive into any more of what you've studied, what you've taught.
Yes, I think I would. And it has a lot to do with your lyrics, Sam. You talk about rage and depleted energy and not knowing where to turn. And I find when I study the topic of people forgiving other people, that that's exactly what they have inside of them when they've been treated very unjustly by other people. In other words, you have two wounds, at least, when people treat you unfairly. It's the original wound, and then what happens inside of you, as you express so well in your song, Forgiveness. And that's why, as a mental health professional, I became interested in this topic. And as a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I devoted 30 years of my career to studying forgiveness because I wanted to get rid of that rage and lack of peace inside of people. So I first had to know what forgiveness is. Socrates would always tell us when we begin examining an idea, first ask the question, what is it? There's a lot of misunderstanding regarding what forgiveness is and what it is not. And I have come to realize that when people forgive, the simplest definition is they are good to those who are not good to them. And quite frankly, that sounds outrageous, because when someone is not good to me, we should get back at them. The idea of the eye for an eye. But a lot of times that doesn't work in terms of one's psychological well-being or the relationship. So I've come to realize that this definition of being good to those who aren't good to you is actually a paradox. It's not a contradiction, but it seems to be one. That if I'm good to those who are not good to me, how could I be restored to a well-being? How could I be restored even in a relationship with someone if I keep doing all the giving and they do all the getting? But that's not what forgiveness is. I want to go through quickly 4 points of what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not excusing what the other did. What the other did was wrong, is wrong, and will always be wrong. But you're engaging in this decision, free will decision, to be good to the person anyway. You don't forget, lest it happen again. People talk about forgive and forget, but again, as a psychologist, I see that people don't forget the wounds against them. They simply remember in new ways. So when they look back, it's not with animosity and the hatred and the worked up emotions that you express so well in your song, Sam. It's more with a sense of sadness. A definite misunderstanding about forgiveness is that it is not reconciliation, although people equate the two. And they think if they forgive, they have to enter into a relationship again, even if that's an abusive relationship. But forgiveness and reconciliation are different. Forgiveness, according to Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and my work is on an ancient Greek philosophical foundation, is a moral virtue that starts within yourself and flows to others for good. Reconciliation is a negotiation strategy between two or more people coming back together in mutual trust. You can forgive without reconciling if the other doesn't, shall we say, shape up. And another thing that forgiveness is not, it is not abandoning the quest for fairness or justice. It's not either or. It's not that you seek forgiveness and therefore have to abandon justice. The two need to grow up together. And so when that happens, you can see that forgiving is still a protection for you because you know what justice is. You may not reconcile. You're not going to excuse. And as you heal, you'll remember in new ways. And here's why I think forgiveness is so important. We bring our anger that we've learned in our family of origin when we were little ones of age 6, 7, or 8 into our new relationships as adults. And if we don't do something about that inner rage that, again, you express so well, you know what we do? We give it to our partners. We pass it on to our children. Then they grow up and they give the resentments, they give their confusions, they give their inner unrest to their children. And on it can go like a virus that doesn't quit. Forgiveness is a cure for the virus of anger. And that's why, even though it's a paradox, it's really good medicine. And this is why I'm so interested in talking with people at this pandemic time in 2020. Many people now who are on what we call lockdown anywhere in the world could start reproducing the kind of unusual and difficult and even toxic relationships that they experienced as a child, now exaggerated during the lockdown with loved ones today when they're adults. So it might be time to take forgiveness very, very seriously. And I'm glad your song points us in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There's I feel like in a lot of studies of philosophy, and there's always a polarity in any topic that you're talking about, and with forgiveness and acceptance versus justice, those can be two poles, and there's always somewhere in the middle that I think you need to be. And I've seen that with also forgiving other people. Sometimes it's more of, I can't forgive myself for not forgiving that person yet. Do you think that there's a lot of misplaced pain from people thinking, well, it's all your fault, you wronged me? But really, when it comes down to it, for me, I know a lot of times that's what hurts the most, is that I don't have the strength to rise above and actually forgive, and I'm the one hurting myself instead of that person harming me.
Sure. Well, when that happens, of course, we have to realize that the relationship naturally is a two-way street. And when one person acts badly toward the other can give it back to them. And so they both need to forgive one another. And you're right, if someone doesn't understand forgiveness or rejects it and eventually says, hey, I could have ended this conflict a long time ago, then self-forgiveness is a real possibility. And what is that? Well, it's giving to yourself the kindness that you give to others. So if you haven't been good to yourself by going along a path of destruction in relationships, and now you don't like what you've done, you can be good to yourself when you weren't good to yourself. And that's self-forgiveness. It doesn't mean you let yourself off the hook, because you also go to the other, try to make it right, and you have the challenge for change.
Yeah, I think I think that's a great transition actually into another idea. I feel that I can speak more freely in song than I can just in regular thoughts. I think I'm going to jump into the next tune actually. This song is just about that same idea with self-forgiveness and trying to balance forgiving others, forgiving yourself, and it's not always an easy thing when wounds are fresh or deep, and that's where this one came from. I wrote it across the trip through the UK. I was trying to sort my mind out a little bit, and came home and kind of finished this tune. It's about exactly that. Lying in the cold and the dark, it's true I lost my way. Though I am jaded, I am wasted, I am tired, I still beg this day to fade. This tangled mind of mine sees truth in silhouettes, though the flame that casts the shadow is long since gone to rest. There's roads for no one else. Must do this for myself. I came for what I wanted, was given what I need. Now I'll give what I've been granted, like storm clouds to the sea. And I'll swim in golden skies, and I'll breathe in forest rain. I will scale these mountains, face these storms inside of me. Somewhere in northern Wisconsin, I found my gravel roads. And though the river washed my body, I found that I've no heart of gold. I thought that space would give me freedom, but the emptiness felt cold. I turned my back on resolution, unearned trust in what I know. There's roads for no one else. Must do this for myself. I came for what I wanted, I was given what I need. Now I'll give what I've been granted, like storm clouds to the sea. Now swim in golden skies, and I'll breathe in forest green. And I will scale these mountains, face these storms inside of me. I turn my focus from the hearth, from my bones I feel the heat. With hazy eyes I take the sunrise with my friends alongside me. We speak of days to come, and have no fear of where I've been. I found a new beginning, I found a new beginning, tangled with the ashes, last chapter's end. I came for what I wanted, I was given what I need. Now I'll give what I've been granted, like storm clouds to the sea. And I'll swim in golden sky, and I'll breathe in forest green. I will scale these mountains, face these storms inside of me. That's my song called Storms Inside of Me. And I think that that's the way that that was written. I didn't realize at the time it was trying to find that balance of forgiving others, forgiving myself, trying to figure out which was which, and not projecting any of my own pain into others' wrongdoings. Yeah.
Well, I think that's, again, very insightful, Sam, with regard to how the process of forgiveness works. As I started studying forgiveness as a research topic in 1985, we asked three basic questions that I'm still asking today in 2020. I'm obviously a very slow learner. And the three questions are, what is forgiveness? We've covered that. How do you go about forgiving? And then what happens as an outcome when you do? And you just touched on the how do you go about it question. And what we have found is that there seems to be a reliable process that most people go through, with, of course, wonderful individual variations for each person. But there seems to be a pathway that's typical. And here's what that pathway is. It encompasses a number of steps, but I'm going to summarize that in what we call 4 phases of the process model of forgiveness. And the very first phase is what we call uncovering of anger or discontent. And we find that when people are in great inner pain, as you were in the UK when you wrote that tune, that you did that out of your own inner suffering. And it's the inner suffering that cries loudest to us. And even though forgiveness is for the other, because you're being good to those who aren't good to you, oftentimes we start the process because we're in such pain, we're looking for a way out of that pain. And so when I work with clients on forgiveness therapy, one of the first things we do is examine the inner pain of the person in what we call the uncovering phase. And we tend to see deep sadness, anger, confusion, thinking over and over. I once worked with a gentleman, a young man, who had a dream every night of his father beating him and chasing him because that's what happened when he was a child. And by the way, he forgave his father and the dream left. But all of this kind of inner pain gets the attention of the person. And so I ask in the next phase, the first is the uncovering, the next is the decision phase. Well, how's it going with your healing journey? What have you been doing to heal the broken heart? And a lot of people who come to me and colleagues of mine who do forgiveness therapy realize that people have tried every therapeutic technique under the sun and they're still hurting. So we tend to ask, would you be willing to think about the possibility of forgiving those who've hurt you? Which of course does sound odd. People can scratch their head and what's this all about? So we go over the definition again and what it is and what it's not. And we always leave it up to the person if they want to choose forgiveness for themselves. It should never be imposed. But you know what? A lot of people do say yes to forgiveness because nothing else has worked to cleanse the deep inner pain of grave injustice. So we go over the definition, make sure they're ready. Then we enter the third of 4 phases, what we call the work phase, where they start doing the work of forgiveness. And that starts with thinking. And it's thinking about the one who hurt you, where we actually look at that person's own wounds. We look at their stumbling. We look at their confusion and how they've passed their pain to you. And we do that not to excuse and say, oh, well, I understand why they are treating me so badly because they're in pain. No, it's to realize that that person is confused, is breaking the rules of justice. And it's out of a sense of stumbling rather than just abject evil, because we want to see a full human being in front of us. We want to see their humanity. And it can take months to actually work on what we call seeing the built-in or inherent worth of the other person, not because of what they've done, but because they are a person, and all people are unique and special. And so is the one who hurt us, and that takes time. When we see that they have inherent worth, not because of what they've done, but in spite of it, that can soften our hearts toward those who've hurt us. And as we soften that heart toward the other, that's the little beginning of compassion. We're more willing to what we call bear the pain of what happened. And we ask people to bear the pain, which is not unlike what hospice tells people when their loved ones are dying. They say, lean into the pain. Why? So you don't end up passing it back to that person or to your loved ones now as you've grown over the years with the pain. If you can bear the pain, it's heroic because you are not passing it on to others, including the one who hurt you, which is giving that person a gift, which is what forgiveness is, being good to those who aren't good to you. And when we see that, we get to the 4th phase, the discovery phase. And you know what we discover? Another paradox. As we have given of our thoughts and our heart, as we're ready to do that, and it takes time, to the other, we're the ones who are healed. And we realize in our science that those who go through this process end up going from depressive symptoms to no depression. Their anger goes down. Do you know who they end up liking? Themselves. A lot of times when we've been beaten down by others, we end up not liking ourselves, and hope for the future increases. Gail Reed, REED, and I did a study over a number of months with abused women in marriages that have now ended. And they pretty much got their lives back. They ended up having a sense of meaning in their life. They had a sense of psychological well-being. We did another study, Marianne Waltman from the Netherlands, and a physician here in Madison, and I and others did a study of cardiac patients, men who've been deeply hurt by others. And when we hooked them up to the heart monitors and had them tell their story of hurt, because this is typical of those with heart problems, the blood flow to the heart got less. They forgave those who hurt them. And when we hooked them up 4 months after the intervention of forgiveness ended, you know what? Their blood flow through the heart actually increased statistically significantly. Anger, now cured, had a direct effect on the major organ of the body, which is the heart. And the physician, Dr. Douglas Russell, who was the head of cardiology at the Veterans Administration here, who's now retired, said we help these men avoid sudden death and chest pains by their forgiving. So not only does forgiveness, when we use the metaphor, heal the broken heart, it literally can cure a physically damaged heart. And so that's the pathway. And I do now have 3 different books I've written for the general public. And one of them I would recommend, I'll hold it up here. It's called 8 Keys to Forgiveness. It's by Norton. And I didn't even know there were 8 keys to forgiveness, but it was an 8 Keys to Forgiveness series of Norton. They asked me to write one on forgiveness. And I said, well, you have to tell me what the 8 keys are. I think they're more than that. But we settled on it. And so I've written this book, which I hope will be helpful to people. We've actually used it in prisons now, where we give this book to men who are incarcerated for life, and they are oftentimes very abused by people in the past, especially in childhood. And they have rage in them, and that's one reason why they hurt others. And they read this book over about a 6-month period, and their anger, depression, and anxiety go way down, where they can live with themselves and others better in a challenging prison environment.
That's really incredible. I think I had a few thoughts going back through with going into step 3, especially. I've heard in a lot of studies of philosophy and kind of more broad ideas of bettering ourselves, that we see other people reflected in ourselves. We see our reflection in the people around us. And I think that when there is a person who we are not forgiving, we see ourselves worse in the reflection that we see in that person. I was reading, what was I reading? I was reading The Alchemist, and there's a little bit at the beginning of that book that talks about an old fable of a boy that was the most gorgeous person, and he would go to the pond every morning, and he would just stare at his own reflection and his beauty, and the birds and the trees and the pond itself. Everyone was just in admiration of his beauty. And one morning he was so enthralled that he lost his balance, and he fell in and he drowned. And the tree asked the pond a few days later, the pond was sobbing and said, I know you're sad. He was beautiful, and but don't be sad. And the pond said, I never noticed the boy. I saw my own reflection in his eyes, and I weep that I can't see my own beauty anymore. And I thought that was really, really interesting, because in looking at other people and looking at their flaws and accepting them as human beings, I think it helps us accept ourselves as imperfect beings as well. Um, and I don't know if that makes sense really, but
It makes a great deal of sense. Actually, it really does. Because a lot of times what we find in the fourth phase, the discovery phase, is we realize how much pain we've had in ourselves and become much more sensitive to the pains in others. And a lot of times people develop new purpose in life, which is to grow in the virtue of forgiveness and give it away to others so that they can bind up others' wounds. And we've been surprised by that. Where deeply hurting people now want to help deeply hurting people. And so
yeah.
they understand that one thing we all have in common is shared woundedness.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest part of the previous song that I played, Storms Inside of Me. I like to chat about it sometimes before I play. And I was amazed with myself. The chorus, I came for what I wanted. I was given what I need. Now I'll give what I've been granted, like storm clouds to the sea. I was so selfish when I left with my energy and with my time. I had friends that were in need. And I didn't have the time for them because I was so kind of self-absorbed in my own pain. And when I left and I found what I needed to, and I found some healing and forgiveness, I came back, and without even really realizing it, I was reaching out to my friends saying, hey, you okay? Hey, what do you need? Hey, I'd like to be here for you. And it was kind of the same thing where I had some friends during that trip that had really helped me sort through some things and help guide me on my own journey of forgiveness. I felt like I wanted to go above and do the same. And it's interesting without realizing it. And then after I wrote that song, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Sometimes I don't realize the things that I'm learning actively until it comes out and I can go back and reflect on it.
That's a very interesting point. And I find that very typical in the healing journey of forgiveness for so many people, Sam.
I think that with the first song, I was going to ask you a question too. So I had written the song Forgiveness without any, I had no means of forgiving the person that I had written that song for. And I was very, very absorbed in my own pain, but I wanted to forgive the person because, as you said earlier, that was, you're seeking that way out of the pain. You're seeking healing. And I wasn't quite ready. And so I wrote the song as though I had learned something, even though I wasn't there. And by performing it, every night in front of folks and chatting about this idea of forgiveness, I started to kind of work it into my own thought actively. The more you practice something, the more a part of it, a part of you it is. What is there that you've seen? Do you think that is a healthy choice, or did I make a bad decision in saying that I had forgiven someone even when I hadn't?
I think saying you have forgiven is actually part of the decision phase of forgiveness, the second of the four. Because what we tend to do there when we talk about the decision to forgive, it's not all wrapped up, but we ask for a commitment. And the commitment basically comes down to, I will walk this pathway, I will learn, and we usually give a homework assignment at that point, which is do no harm. So we're not asking to embrace the other and be all loving and kind. We're asking to refrain from the negative, do no harm. That's much easier to do than say, okay, go out and be a gift by your kindness for that other person. So you are committing to forgiveness. And then the commitment of forgiveness is where the learning comes, because you started actually literally practicing forgiveness through the therapy of music. And Aristotle tells us that we grow in any moral virtue by three things: practice, practice, practice. The fact that you began practicing that was great. And in the practice, you got greater insight. And in the greater insight became greater facility of being able to forgive, and you are growing in the virtue of forgiveness. Congratulations. You're an Aristotelian. You followed his pathway.
I really like that idea. I'm also really glad to hear that. I think that when a song is new and it's fresh, it's there's something very strange about it, and it seems kind of alien. It's very intense to play every time, and the forgiveness that I craved was just as intense. And I had a really hard time sometimes playing that song in public because it was such a strong emotional, um, response. But the more you play a song, sometimes the easier, as your fingers know where to go, and you know what's coming next, and you can think about it, and it doesn't become so intense. And it's interesting how the more I played it, and the less very intense that song got for me, um, the less intense my pain towards that other person was as well. And I think that yeah, maybe I should keep doing that. I'll write a whole forgiveness album for different people.
Well, there you go. And in fact, instead of reading a book such as Eight Keys to Forgiveness, your therapy was the song. And here's what we find when people read a book and they practice forgiveness. First, it's a gargantuan struggle with great intensity. And the more they practice it, that intensity starts to lessen. Exactly what happened to you with the song. So now we have two pathways of forgiving. We have reading and the intellectual side, and music of the heart. And so either way can lead to a resolution of that inner pain through being good to the one who isn't good to us.
Yeah, I think that with something that you had mentioned earlier of forgiving other people, there's kind of there can be a polarity of cutting that person completely out of your life. We don't need to do that. You can accept things that you don't like, and you can still have it a part of you. But also, you don't have to be really lovey and really over the top to that person. There's a happy middle somewhere in that polarity. And I think that my next tune was really about that idea of trying to forgive a person. And I wanted to establish some healthy boundaries for sure, of for myself, not for that person. It was me deciding how much energy I was going to give that person if they continued wronging me. And it was about my search for grace in that, because it is hard. And I think that sometimes that's what you had mentioned with do no harm, and that can be the hardest thing sometimes, not even just being nice, of just not being mean. And that was the one with this song. I think I'll jump right into it. It's a song called Comfort Grace. And I wrote it a few years back about that journey for me. When I get really grumpy, when I start festering on things, mulling things over, and I get into very circular thinking, I kind of grind my gears a little bit. I like to go outside for a very long time. That's always helped me, and I think that as an outdoorsman growing up, in hunting and fishing, most of my time to let my gears grind was when I was out in the outdoors. So still, whenever I'm really stuck on something, I like to get out. And I was stuck in the city of Glasgow, Scotland, and I was really festering something that someone had done, and they were on the other side of the world. I was like, how can you be causing me harm from the other side of the world just in your words? This doesn't make sense. And so I decided to go outside, and I asked my friend, what's something around here I can do outside for a long time? And she said, well, you can do the West Highland Way. I said, all right, well, I'm going to do it next week. It's a 96-mile hike through the highlands and mountains of Scotland. And I said, all right, well, I'm going to do it. She said, well, no, you have to wait until springtime. You can't do it in the middle of winter. You're going to freeze to death. I said, well, I don't care. I'm going to give it a shot. And so I got out there and I had a 90-liter rucksack filled to the brim with canned food and water and books and things that were so dumb of me to bring with me. It's just not how hiking works. And it was way too much weight. And it rained and snowed and froze. I had a pair of clothes for walking every day and a pair of clothes for sleeping. And I'd get out of my tent and I'd spend a bit of time breaking all the ice off of my clothes to put them back on to keep walking. And it was just miserable. And the third day in, I was walking down the side of this big hill or overlooking Loch Lomond, and I twisted my foot really badly, and it's right away swelled up and it turned purple. And I sat down with my bag and it's like, why am I here? Normal people don't do these things. Why do I choose to do this with my time? And right as I was thinking and kind of pitying myself, there was this enormous sheet of fog that came in, and I could see my side of Loch Lomond, but I couldn't see the other side, and it looked like the trees were just hanging off the edge of the world. And right then and there, I went into my bag and grabbed my journal, and I wrote this song. So here it is. It's called Comfort Grace. Here we are again. The path ahead splits in two. This is how it ends. This time it's not up to you. I have my faults, and I've made my failures, but I see my chance. This is how it ends. And I stood there at the edge of the world with my arms outstretched, and I laid bare my chest and I yelled with all my heart, I've come for grace. I've come for grace. And I see upcoming challenges. I tighten my bandages. I march one foot in front of the other. Who I was, who I will be, changes now. It changes now. And I stood there at the edge of the world, my arms outstretched, and I laid bare my chest and I yelled with all my heart, I've come for grace. I've come for grace. I am unclean. There's something down that road I haven't seen. There's something down that trail that moves me on, leads me home. And I'm cold. There's something in that wind that warms my soul. There's something down that trail that I need to make me clean. And I stood there at the edge of the world with my arms outstretched, and I laid bare my chest and I yelled with all my heart, I've come for grace. I've come for grace. And I stood there at the edge of the world with my arms outstretched, and I laid bare my chest and I yelled with all my heart, I've come for grace. I think that what we what we were chatting about before with, forgiving other people, forgiving ourselves, giving other people um, the opportunity to be human, to be imperfect. It's not up to us to control what is moral in this world. All we can do is accept that there will be wrongdoings, and I think that was a big part of that. Is we fear what we don't understand, and we don't understand chaos and things that we can't control. So sometimes when we can't control other people, we can't control the mistakes that they make, we're afraid of that. And fear, I think Yoda said, fear turns into anger and hate, and that only hurts us, really.
I think your 3 songs, Sam, are incredible. And here's why. You write from the heart, and you deliberately write about your own pain. And as you say, we can't help what others do, and there's going to be injustice in the world, and it's going to happen to each one of us. And out of your experience has come high artistry. Here's a question I have for everyone who is participating with us here today. How can we get people ready in this world for the inevitable? How can we get them ready for the injustices that 100% will come to all of us? And you saw it in Sam showing his heart to you. My concern is with the 4-year-old who's sitting there at the dining room table, and one of his parents is pounding a fist and yelling because the child won't eat the peas. And it's not about the peas. It's about maybe what happened to that parent at work, or some other frustration that is carried to the dinner table and the peas and comes out there. Here's why I'm very worried about that 4-year-old. That 4-year-old is too young to process all of this and to understand that that anger wasn't meant for him or her at all. In fact, it was a displacement of anger. What's going to happen to that child who gets that over and over again when that child is 25, 35, or 85? How is that child now as an adult going to deal with these kind of issues? But I don't know how to forgive, is what I oftentimes hear. And Sam, you expressed that when you said, I just started composing the song and singing the song, and I committed to forgiveness, but I didn't really know the pathway.
Yeah.
So my real question to everybody is, how can we prepare children now for the injustices that they're going to be experiencing throughout their life so they're not crushed by their injustices once they're adults? And that has been a very pressing question for me for the past 20 years. And so I started something called forgiveness education, where we literally have built forgiveness curricula for children from age 4 to age 18, pre-kindergarten to the end of high school. In terms of US parlance, that would be primary 1 through the end of secondary school in the United Kingdom. And we teach forgiveness through stories. And we have worked in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and a colleague of mine, Peli Galiti, G-A-L-I-T-I, is working with well over 100 teachers in Athens and Corinth and Thessaloniki, Greece. A colleague of mine, Jacqueline Song, and I are working with the superintendent of schools in Manila, the Philippines. We're working with Dr. Brown in Liberia, Africa, where they've gone through Ebola and now they're going through COVID. And we train teachers to actually use our curriculum guides to help children learn about forgiveness. And here's just one example in the first grade guide, or primary 3 in Belfast. We teach through story, and here's Dr. Seuss's Horton Hears a Who. It's a kindly elephant who saves an entire world of who's from a little flower when no one else can see the who's. But Horton keeps saying, and here's where this inherent worth of all people comes in, but a person is a person no matter how small. Which translates into, is that true? Even if someone hurts you, are they still a person no matter how they behave? And that's the challenge of forgiveness. And if we can start letting children know about forgiveness, they don't have to be champion forgivers, but learn about forgiveness in the quiet of their classroom with such stories as Horton Hears a Who, might they grow to understand the virtue of forgiveness, start practicing it as you have over and over with your guitar, Sam, and use it in the classroom, on the playground, and at home, so that when they're 25 and there's chaos at work or chaos in the family, you know what they have ready and willing and able? The pathway of forgiveness, because they've practiced it since they were little. And when we let teachers use these curriculum guides and help children learn about forgiveness through story, the children's anger actually goes down, and they actually begin to forgive others who've hurt them to a much stronger degree. And so what we're doing is we're helping them to be able to write those songs, as you have, Sam, to be able to navigate so that when they're the parent and the child isn't eating the peas, they're not going to come down as hard as they might have had they not learned about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Here's a final thought with which I would like to leave everybody, and it's this. I have come to realize that this is a tough life. And as you say, Sam, there is injustice whether we try to prevent it or not. And I have found that there is a fork in the road for all of us. And to the one side, we can continue to absorb the anger, give out anger, measure for measure, and let other people take that anger and continue to give it to others, so that the legacy in their life is to leave anger to the next generation and the next generation after that. Or we can take the challenge of your songs very seriously, start thinking about what forgiveness is, deciding to practice it, and after we're done practicing it, practice it some more, and bring it into our families. We can use these curriculum guides in families. And you know what that fork in the road leads to? A legacy of love, a legacy of understanding, a legacy of kindness toward others that we now will give to our children, who will grow up and give that legacy of love to their children, so that 100 years from now, there will still be something of you left in the world. You know what that is? Your love. Your love can exist in reality within the hearts of others you leave behind. And so the choice is ours. Are we going to leave more anger in the world or more love? Forgiveness education and the practice of forgiveness and listening to your songs, Sam, might help us take that fork in the road that leads to a legacy of love that lives on long after we're gone.
Yeah, it's kind of like what you chatted about with this COVID-19 outbreak is kind of, do we choose to spread the virus or do we spread the cure? And I think that we are all, we all have the cure right with us, is, to this forgiveness, is this love. And I think that, as I use my songs just as my own therapy, and just totally selfishly, it's my own way of dealing with things. But I'm lucky enough to be able to travel around and play these for other people and maybe spread that message. And I think that something that I'm lucky enough to be is, I'm a pretty big big dude. And sometimes people don't expect that when they, hear my music or see me. And I think that sometimes in, in small bars to big theaters to everything between, there are people that are that they have this pain or this anger inside of them and they want forgiveness, but sometimes, since it wasn't taught to them young, like you're saying, they might think it's emasculine, or it's a sign of weakness, or it's a sign of these things that maybe they have a negative connotation of. But I think that that's why I feel lucky sometimes to be kind of a big dude. I'm like, no, it's totally fine. Let's do it. Let's love each other. Let's be good to each other, forgive each other. And I think that introducing that at such a young age, like you have, makes it more approachable, makes it more acceptable to people down the road, when it's not just this philosophical idea floating around in the ether that people need to try to find in a self-help book somewhere down the line. It's a very real, just as real as gravity and math and these things that that we know are everyday part of our lives. So I appreciate your work.
Yes. Oh, you finish up, Sam. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, it's all right. I appreciate your work, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for what you do and what you've done for the world around us.
Well, thank you, Sam, and the same to you. We simply have different methods. Mine is the egghead method, and yours is the guitar in your voice. And both are centering on the same issue, is to acknowledge pain, find that forgiveness can be an antidote to pain, so that we can give goodness to others in such a degree and as concretely and as real as you say, like math and peas, so that we can literally give that to others for good. And that's the key of forgiveness. To do this, sure, for me when I'm drowning and need the life preserver, but when I stand on my feet in the safety of the shore, I now should consider giving this to others for their good.
Absolutely. I think with that, I'm going to circle back on that song that I played at the beginning, Forgiveness, and kind of come full circle with this. So to the folks that have been here with us watching this video, thank you to you guys for taking the time to be present with us. And I hope that you've all taken something from this and hopefully share it with the folks around you. Share forgiveness, share love, be good people, do good things, make the world better. This is my song called Forgiveness. Just released it as a single on all streaming platforms. You can find it on my website, www.samness.us. And we're going to put links for some other of my work with this video and some of Dr. Bob Enright's as well. I'm careless, courageous, I am free. A guitar in my hand, and the highway at my feet. I have strength in my lungs, nothing's stopping me. But I wake to find a darkness, it's just another dream. I open up my eye, I understand that I must go. Seems I've overstayed my welcome in the place that I call home. I bow my head down like so many times before. I cry out for forgiveness as my knees fall to the floor. I fear I know the answer, and I fear fear itself. I fear the only answer is to do this by myself. Oh, I know. I know. When I make peace and I am safe, my demons do not rest. I just run away. If my pride looks like my courage, then how dare I speak of grace? I will find my path. I will find my path. I can find my strength. My brother, I have pain. It doesn't go away. It's somewhere in my stomach. It's somewhere in my way. My brother, I have rage. I can't live this way. My eyes, they cry for sunlight. Trying to find it all the same. I bow my head down like so many times before. I cry out for forgiveness as my knees fall to the floor. I fear I know the answer, and I fear fear itself. I fear the only answer is to do this by myself. Oh, I know. I know. And I make peace and I am safe. My demons do not rest. I just run away. My pride was like my courage, then how dare I speak of grace? I will find my path. I will find my path. I can find my strength. I can find my strength. That's all from me. And today, I want to thank everyone again for tuning in and being a part of us and our discussion today. Thank you so much to Dr. Robert Enright for being in this conversation and helping to spread this cure to the folks around us. Thank you.
I'm careless, courageous, I am free. My guitar in my hands, and the highway at my feet. I have strength in my lungs, and nothing's stopping me. But I wake to find a darkness, it was just another dream. Up my eyes, I understand that I must go. Seems I've overstayed my welcome in a place that I call home. I bow my head down like so many times before. I cry out for forgiveness as my knees fall to the floor. I fear I know the answer, and I fear fear itself. I fear the